I want to see everyone too. All right, great. So yeah, hello everybody. Sorry, we're gonna have probably a few of these little shuffles throughout the day. I was supposed to be in person. I'm actually in San Francisco, but I'm just recovering from a sickness. So number one, I have sincere apologies that I can't be there today. And number two, also apologies if there's some droning and hoarse voice in the middle of my session today. I'm not going to take too much of your time. I just wanted to share some updates from the SPIFFE side of the project, what's been going on in SixSpec and kind of the groups around SixSpec. The high level view here is that the set of SPIFFE specifications has been going through a cool down for some time now, which is great news. You know, these are not things that you want to be kind of like rapidly changing or evolving. The SixSpec meeting cadence, SixSpec is the special interest group that kind of presides over the SPIFFE specification set, and the SPIFFE maintainers kind of participate through this group. That meeting cadence, which was at one time weekly, then following that bi-weekly, has now been changed to monthly. And even then, there are some months where we don't find an agenda. So this is all kind of good news. It's an indicator that the specs are more or less kind of ironed out and mature. We do have kind of this slow trickle of changes coming in. These changes are like more or less related to refinements and clarifications of the existing specs. It's not to say that those things aren't important. They're very important. You know, if the spec is not really as valuable if it can be interpreted in many ways, right? So some of the changes coming in are around these clarifications to make sure it can be interpreted only one way. But you know, that said, they're not really like material changes to the way that anything works. Folks who have been following the project closely might ask, like, oh, I remember that a couple years ago there was a bunch of talk about this thing called transitive identity in SixSpec, which just kind of cooled off. Also, I wanted to give a quick update on this because even though it seems to have cooled off, there's actually kind of a bit of a flurry of activity behind this technology. What is this transitive identity? The idea here is that we want to be able to give some authenticity to like user originating requests. So, you know, if a user makes a request out there somewhere on the internet and then it kind of enters your stack and traverses down your stack and eventually hits somewhere that is controlling user data. There's a strong desire from a bunch of folks in the community to be able to make a decision at that point in time that says like, okay, we only want to operate over the user data if we can prove that the user has actually issued this request. And so how do you do that? That was kind of the original goal of this transitive identity work. And we want to be able to do this also without having to like propagate the user's access token. The user's access token is usually replayable and sensitive, and if you propagate it, it can be stolen. And so we want to be able to limit access to user data only to requests which have been originated by the user. At the same time, we don't want to propagate the user's token. So what do we do? And then the final goal of that group was also to kind of understand how this request has entered the system and reached the validator. So, you know, did it come in from some kind of corner? Did it originate from somewhere inside the infrastructure? Did it originate from the internet? Did it enter, you know, through this set of load balancers or through this other set of load balancers? It turns out that understanding these kinds of ingress points are important for this kind of decision making in those contexts. So, you know, we've put some thought over the past 2 years, I'd say, into how to accomplish this. And in thinking more about the problem, we identified two kind of primary challenges. The first challenge is, how do you transmit this user identity in a trustworthy way? So, you know, we don't want to forward the user's token, which would come with other problems too, is now that everyone has to understand how to validate the user's token, right? But beyond that, it's kind of simple to do in a single trust domain because you all trust the same authority, and so you can kind of lean on this authority to make some kind of statement about this. But in a federated environment, it's much harder because it's not really clear to what extent you trust a foreign authority to make these kinds of claims, right? A foreign authority can claim it authenticated a user, it didn't authenticate. So that was one of the big challenges. Another one of the big challenges was exactly how we understand these like ingress pathways of these requests. And the part that makes this hard is performance and availability requirements. So what we don't want to have to do is we don't want to have to like round trip some kind of central authority, you know, on a hop by hop basis to kind of record the provenance of these things. We want to be able to record these things without having to make these big round trips and do some kind of local operation instead. So these are the two kind of primary challenges that we saw in this work over the years of studying it. So now we have a bona fide effort to actually try and solve these problems, which is I think really exciting. There will be a talk about this later on today, which I'm really looking forward to. And the thinking here is that we can solve this problem. We can solve these two challenges with two kind of new ideas or primitives. One of those is what we call an assertion. So this is effectively just some kind of lightweight tuple that says, you know, identity foo has asserted some arbitrary piece of information, and then there's a signature over it. And what this solves is it solves this kind of identity attribution, or how do you prove the user identity? So what we can say is, hey, you know, load balancer identity foo has authenticated user bar, and foo has signed over this assertion to show that, hey, yes, indeed, like I have done that thing. Why this solves the problem in federated environment is because it makes the entity really, really clear, like who is the one which is asserting this thing. We don't really have that idea when you validate SVIDs and other stuff in SPIFFE, and so bringing that front and center such that you basically have to think about it when authorizing was an important kind of design choice. And then the final bit here is a token format that can be locally wrapped or extended. So this would allow the token to kind of be, attenuate is not the right word, but it would allow the token to kind of accumulate signatures along the way such that you can record the ingress pathways without having to round trip any kind of authority for additional authority signatures. So at a very, very high level, very, very hand wavy, this is kind of the basic thinking. And as I mentioned, there's some work going on this right now. We have a working group called the Assertions and Tokens Working Group. There's a Slack channel available in SPIFFE Slack. If you go there, you'll find documents, and this kind of where the folks working on this stuff hang out. We have bi-weekly calls on this work. It's still very, very much a work in progress. You know, we're beginning to make some good progress on kind of the token semantics. We still have progress to be made on identity binding, identity and key bindings, and also, you know, the assertions tuple itself. So by no means do we have a solution or a close solution, but it is quite promising progress that you know we've had a hard time making over the last couple of years when thinking about these problems. So it's really, really great to see. And as I mentioned, there will be a presentation later on today from Marquez, who's a researcher working on this problem with us. So I'm really looking forward to that. That is all I have for you today. Thank you very much for coming. Do you have any questions?
I think everyone here is excited about about transitive identity work.
It's been a long time in the coming.
Yeah. Who's looking to use it?
I know HPE has a big need for it, and we've heard from Netflix and other folks have a big need for it. Facebook has the same problem, but they have their own solution. But we know that the problem is out there. Right now, it's also kind of like there's a little bit up in the air because this is the first time that SPIFFE is ever like inventing a new document type. And so it's a little bit of an uncharted waters for us. You know, SPIFFE kind of vowed to never really to do this. But we've kind of found ourselves with our hands tied because there is no existing format that has the properties that we need to accomplish this. And so it's kind of the only path forward.
Do you think SPIFFE will be supporting any other identity documents beyond this new one?
That's a really good question. There's been some folks who, there's a question here quickly, if the tokens will be based on JSON. I don't think so. If we have to invent a new token, we probably are not going to use JSON. But TBD, we'll see what the community demands. In terms of other document types, this is the only one that is under, I would say, serious consideration. We have had community requests for, the only other one that really comes to mind is like SSH certs. And I think that the requests around SSH certs are mostly from kind of a convenience standpoint rather than from a, hey, this document gives us a new capability standpoint. And so my personal opinion would be, it's kind of a bit of a hard sell to have another document type that has similar properties, because when do you use which one, and it's kind of ambiguous. But we can see like this assertions and tokens group, like this is a token that brings wholly new capabilities beyond what JWT is capable of. And so I think this is kind of a bit of a better fit, but being a community driven project, if the need is there, that we'll do something. But as of now, I would say this is kind of the front runner for a potentially new document type.
See you, Zach.
Any other questions?
Very good on this side.
We still have a couple of minutes. I don't know, Augustine, if you want to start sharing your screen.
Yep, I can share my screen for the Spire updates.
All right.